that allows them to have sufficient income to be good, productive family members and good, productive citizens. And this last comment is controversial among those currently serving, some of whom are at this table, I'm sure. And it's probably a lack of my understanding about how things are. But I hope the system will really focus on, spend its money on, spend its time on career and technology education. And I don't think we are completely doing that today in some settings. The pre-engineering program is my example of that. I just don't think it's the job of the career and technology education program to prepare students to be successful in engineering school. I do believe with all my heart it's our job to prepare people to not just be successful in their career, but to be successful in their college career. And that does require some strong academic components within our vocational programs. And I strongly am supportive of the teaching of math and science and language arts within the vocational program, maybe with some teachers who are specialized in that area as part of the system. But I hope that's to prepare better machinists, or better mechanics, or better nurses than it is to prepare specifically for a college program. When I was director, the state was going through some sort of a financial crisis, and I got a call one day from a very, very influential legislator. Roy, we'd like for VOTAC to take over driver education. We're going to lose driver education because we just simply don't have enough money. And I said, you know, that's just really not our role. Well, don't you all prepare people for jobs? And I said, we do. And he said, well, if they can't get to their jobs, how are they going to have a job? And so I think there's a lot of that mentality out there. What we do so well that people do ask us to take on more and more and more. And I don't think we can do that without really thoughtfully thinking about our philosophy, our mission, our purpose, and the application of resources to those.
I heard a panel on a national conference, NCLA, if you all went to that. One of the panelists had a real controversial question. He started out, and of course I steal everything I get, but he said, I know I have the right to remain silent, I just don't have the ability. I listed 5 things, that's why I didn't want to go first, because I'd let you piggyback on some of that. I guess in 10, 15 years, I hope that we maintain a strong network of tech centers that we now have. When I look in that room, and Pat, you know what I'm talking about, you see so many new faces, and you see a lot of folks just kind of drop jaws, you know, what did I get myself into? And we've had so much turnover. I always worry that you know, that some of them, hey, this being a college president might be kind of a neat deal if they ever, you know, or what's so bad about being a part of the higher ed, or I just hope they buy into the system. And we have a small group that we call the silverbacks among the superintendents that still remember, you know, having conversations with Francis Tuttle and Bruce Gray, and only about 4 or 5 of us left. And so I worry about that, and I hope that we can, you know, have those guys drink the Kool-Aid and be able to be part of that. I would love to see an integration of what we do in the high schools with what we do in the tech centers. I still feel like there's this wedge between, especially like the ag teachers and what's happening in our tech centers. And if we could ever marshal those sources, and I know, Pat, you've been struggling with this for years, if we could ever combine the power that the ag community represents with the power of the tech centers, with all the training we do for medicine industry, you know, there's no end to what we can do in the legislature. And that continues to be a challenge. If I had the answer to that, I'd write a book and go on tour and, do special workshops. Keep the governance system in place. That is the one thing I feel this of every fiber of my being, that's why we're as great as we are, is because of our governance system. And I think, Roy, you said one time, Dr. Tuttle, if you had one piece of advice, what would it be? He said, don't let anybody get between you and the money.
That's
And
right.
that's what that means, that Roy goes direct as state director and lobbies his case instead of going through a state Department of Education or the region for higher education. This is a little personal note on my part because it was a failure that I had. I'd like the Panhandle to become our 30th tech center. We tried that 3 different times. After 30, I think we're pretty well done covering the state. But the Panhandle, obviously, when I went to Red River, I went through the Panhandle, George Nye's Northwest Passage, and I looked at all that, and I'm thinking, we got to have, if we could figure out how to put one in Chisholm Trail and West Watkins and some of these, rural areas, we can figure out the Panhandle. But that's important to me. And then the last one would be, always keeping the customer first. I always end my travel storytelling with this quote that, the most important thing is to make sure the most important thing remains the most important thing, and that's the customer. And I would include in that, let's don't let this be your grandfather's Tech school. And by that, I mean, we saw what happened with TG&Y when Walmart took over. Somebody listened to a customer a little bit better than the other. We saw what happened with the big 3 in the U.S. auto industry. All of a sudden these upstarts from Japan came in, and now they're not even, we don't even have the largest selling car in the world anymore. But and I think that's evolved. Biz needs to be a vital part. Biz has opened doors for us with the corporate community. That I think part of the reason the Keating deal can never get traction is because we knew we had business and industry that go arm in arm the Capitol and say, Frank, what are you doing? These guys are helping us. This is economic development. So, we got to keep that strong. I'd love to see every tech center have a dropout recovery program, some kind of alternative education program, like what we call Project Hope. Some of the strongest advocates we have in career tech are the moms and dads of those kids that say, you saved our son's life. I'm convinced something bad would have happened to him. He'd either be in prison or he'd be dead right now. And these are smart kids. And some tech centers think, that's the image we're trying to get away from. That's a bunch of crap. Those are the kind of kids we need to be serving. I'd like to see us, and I know they took a big hit starting with the Keating administration, but the skills centers. We used to have twice as many programs behind prison walls as we used to have, and that's just a shame. We'll spend $30,000 to $50,000 a year on an inmate, depending on what security level he's at, whether it's a minimum, medium, or maximum security. But we won't spend the money it takes, to put in career tech programs that reduce recidivism by 66%. It makes no sense to me. We don't have a prison problem. We have a reintegration problem. We don't do anything with them. And I'd like to see us keep our emphasis on that. And then kind of take the other side. I think the academies are one of the biggest things that have happened to us on the positive side. And Roy, we keep track of our graduates to make sure they stay in engineering or stay, in the health sciences area. But what it has done for us as a side venture, it's opened doors to an audience that wouldn't even give us the time of day. And I'll give you an example of that. OCPA, who I'm a member of. You always try to keep track of your guys that are saying bad stuff about you. But one time they came in, and I'll never forget the quote. They said, finding waste in the tech system is as easy as throwing a basketball in the ocean. And that just got all over me. So I called the main guy there at OCPA and said, have you ever been inside a career tech center? He said, no, I haven't. I said, why don't you come to Francis Tuttle someday? And to his credit, he came. He spent a half a day with us. And I had the good fortune of taking him through one of our academies. And it was the Bioscience and Medicine Academy. And I had the people that, I don't know if it's Jody or at the time or who it was, but she had she had 3 parents there. And after we did the tour of everything, and we talked about all the math and science and the AP stuff that we're doing, he talked to these moms, And one of the moms was a homeschool, the other mother was well, actually had two moms and a dad, and the other was Edmond Santa Fe, and I think we had one from Deer Creek. And they were talking about how the rigor and relevance in a tech center just blew the high schools away. And here you're talking about one of the top common school, it's probably two really, in the state, Deer Creek and Edmond. And then you're talking about a homeschool. And then I found out later that this homeschooler parent was socialized with Brandon Dutcher, who we had out at the school. And as Brandon was leaving that, he said, I always knew that Common Ed needed competition. I just didn't think it would come from you guys. You're showing the model. And to this day, they haven't written much about career tech about that. And I don't think we could have pulled that off if we hadn't had the academies in there. And then what I also hear, Michelle can probably speak to this much better than I can, we get a lot of students that enroll our other programs because it's all of a sudden acceptable because their buddies are in either the bioscience and engineering academies, and they say, golly, I'd like to go to a school like that, but they wind up in something like cybersecurity, or they wind up in something like even welding, or they wind up, it's all of a sudden become acceptable for those kids that we never have been able to attract into career tech. And as long as we have open seats, I don't think we're leaving anybody off the deal. So Roy, that has been kind of a plus for us, but that's kind of the other side of the coin, because if somebody would have told me 15 years ago that we're going to be teaching AP math and science and having college prep and career tech, I'd say, you're nuts. We don't need to be doing that. But I think we've been able to make that a real positive and keep true to our mission of preparing folks for success in the workplace. In our situation, for an engineer, we just happens 5 years later, but we've been able to reverse. Danny King, our director of our Portland campus at Bruce Grace Center, has actually kept records. And when we started the Pre-Engineering Academy, OSU, OU, and Oklahoma Christian would tell you that 2 out of every 3 freshmen that roll in the College of Engineering drop out. Now they stay in college because they're bright kids, usually College of Business or somewhere in that neighborhood, but they drop out of engineering because they haven't gotten the practical side of what an engineer does. We've been able to reverse that. 2 out of every 3 stay in engineering, and it's because they know what an engineer does, and we feel like the early results are that they actually are using engineering as a career field. Shouldn't be our main focus, and probably those are the only 2 academies. You never say never, but I'm thinking I can't imagine us expanding on that. But as long as we continue to offer the welding and the cosmetology and the auto service technician, I just think that it's something that I would hope we continue to see. That's a long answer to your question, but yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Any burning curiosity out there? Okay, so then the final question that I have for you all is pretty wide open. It is, what is the one thing that you would leave us with if you could want us to remember anything about what you all had to say today? What would that one thing be?
With me, it's never lose your passion for career tech. If you don't have the passion after you've been through this presentation, I hope you get out of the profession, because that's what we need, are folks that just live, eat, and breathe and sleep this stuff, because it is important. And another reason why why the Keating stuff never did take hold, we were kind of the Teflon of the state agency, because whenever he would talk bad about us, there'd be somebody saying, "No, Governor, that's not the career tech I know. I mean, the career tech I know helped get my brother-in-law a new job after he got laid off the General Motors plant," or the career tech I know saved my nephew's life because he was in Project Hope, or the career, and there were stories like that all over. It's just because I think we have a tendency to hire people of passion. I heard Frosty Troy one time when he was a commencement speaker for one of our skills centers programs, and he said, I will never turn down a career tech presentation, an opportunity to speak about career tech. He said, because you guys are doing the Lord's work. He said, I honestly believe that, and I really feel like what we're doing is so important. If you don't feel that with every fiber of your being, then I hope you'll go to another profession, and because I think that's what it's all about, is just have that fire in your belly and keep it, and let's go forward.
I think you heard us talk about some of these founding leaders that kind of got us where we were today, and I think they were really true servant leaders. We didn't talk about a lot of what they did other than career tech, but to the T, most of these leaders were involved in civic clubs, they were in chambers, And I know these two guys are. I've done a lot of that in my career. The good Lord put us here to help each other. What we do in Career Tech helps thousands of people. And if we all do it together with a spirit of cooperation, and we strive for excellence, and we never settle for what we're doing today, because it can be better tomorrow. I get so mad at legislators and policymakers who think that we just maintain the status quo, and we never try to improve. I can tell you that working for this guy and other people I have in my career, working as a colleague of Tom's and other colleagues of his, we think about how to get better every time we're together, every time we meet. We hear best practices, we travel to other states. That's what has made Career Tech successful. And the future is up to you, but I think that we have a tremendously bright future if we all just strive to be a servant leader and to help those people that walk through the doors of our schools.
You know, as Pat was talking, I was probably a little bit arrogant and unappreciative of the fabulous, great, wonderful Francis Tuttle when I went to the State Department and made all those changes. You know, maybe I should have said, this guy's a legend in the field of vocational technical education, and far be it from me to propose any changes because he's so good at what he did. But as we made changes, frankly, pretty rapidly within the state agency and within the system, nobody could have been any more supportive of that than Francis Tuttle. And I hope you take that same attitude in the place where you work. You walked in and the place was pretty darn good. Maybe it was even great, but you keep trying to figure out how to make it better. I was here in this room a year ago when Bob Summers spoke, and I came early like I did today. I wanted to hear Tom talk about leadership. I just love it. And everything he said, by the way, is right. I mean, everything he said, pay attention. And Bob was talking about we can't rest on our laurels, and he used what I thought was a really poor example of a Model T. You know, back in the day it was a pretty good car, but luckily somebody came along and said, how can we make Ford better and a Ford better and a Ford better? And I have a little more current example of that. When I was in education, I drove 15-year-old cars, but the last several years, I've bought, or leased now, a new Lexus SUV every 3 years. And the first one I bought was in 2004, and it was by far the best car I'd ever owned. I mean, it beat those old 15-year-old GMC Tahoes that all over the place. It had bells and whistles that I just could not even imagine. And because I was putting a lot of miles on it, I traded then in 3 years for the identical model. It was so much better than that 2004 Lexus. Same brand, same model, same equipment on it. It was just 3 years later, they had improved that Lexus so much. In 2010, I replaced that 2007. And that 2010 model was just fabulously better than the 2007 model. And I kept thinking, how in the world can they make these things any better? And now I've got the later model, and guess what? It's even better than the first. Well, I hope that's the way we approach the vocab system. Lexus probably could have said, we're beating the socks off of these American automobile makers, and let that 2004 principally the same. Instead, no, let's figure out how to make it better and better and better. And that's the hope I have for you as vocational educators. You don't have to be state director to do it. You don't have to be the superintendent of the schools to do it. Let me go back to Canadian Valley. We had arguably the worst adult education program in the world when I went there. And trust me, I didn't make it one of the best. Earl County, he came into a position as Director of Adult Education, Business Industry Services, we call it now, and figured out, you know, we can turn this around to the good. And it doesn't have to be from awful to great. It can be from great to greater to greater to greater.
Well, I've gotten to participate actually as an audience member, and this year's my first year to facilitate, so I was pretty excited about that. Every year I hear different stories, and even sometimes, even if it's the same story, they give a little bit better detail or throw in there something they didn't tell the last time. And I hope that you all appreciate how special it is to have tribal storytellers from our system, and that you begin to seek out additional tribal stories, not only from your school, but from other leaders in the career tech system that have been around for a while and have known and have experienced some of the same things, maybe just from a different perspective. Because as you can see, it is so important in continuing our legacy in career and technology education. So I'd just like to say thank you to the three of you for taking time today to share your experiences with us. And I think Whitney has a gift to present to you.
Okay, we just have a gift here for you, a token of our appreciation of sharing these stories. I know it's actually been phenomenal to hear these stories, and I could just go on just listening to hear the background of kind of where we are today. So on behalf of TechCap, we just have a token of our appreciation of taking time out of your busy schedule to share your information with us, and we certainly very much appreciate it. Thank you.
So now, it's time for you to tell your own tribal stories. And I know that the assignment was, for some, a little bit harder to grasp than others, or actually Lamisa did a very good job of explaining it. So if you have a different tribal story now that you've heard these tribal stories that you want to share, other than the one you sent to me or brought, feel free to do that. But just at your tables and get up and stretch ahead of time. We have an hour for this activity. You've been setting a long time. The bar is open.